I felt the needle's first touch against my skin, and my breath caught. Not from pain, but from the way his eyes lingered on mine, dark and focused, as if he could see straight through me. The tattoo parlor was empty except for us, the hum of fluorescent lights mixing with the buzz of his machine. I'd come for ink, but the heat building between us promised something much more permanent. Hey, if you're loving this already, smash that like button and hit subscribe. Let me know in the comments what caught your attention first. The consultation had started innocently enough. I'd walked into Midnight Ink just before closing, clutching a crumpled piece of paper with my design sketched out. The shop was dimly lit, most of the artists already gone for the day. But Dan was still there, cleaning his station, dark hair falling across his forehead as he worked. "We're technically closed," he said without looking up, but his voice carried no irritation. When he finally glanced my way, something shifted in his expression. But I suppose I could make an exception. I approached his chair, suddenly self-conscious about the summer dress I'd chosen. It seemed too delicate for this place of leather and steel, but Dan's eyes swept over me with obvious appreciation. "What can I do for you?" he asked, his voice lower now, more intimate. I handed him my sketch, a delicate vine that would wrap around my ribs, disappearing beneath the edge of my dress. "Something like this? My fiancé thinks I should get something smaller, more hidden." Dan studied the drawing, then looked back at me with a slight smirk. "And what do you think?" "I think he doesn't get to decide what I do with my body." The words surprised me with their boldness. Dan's smirk deepened into something more appreciative, more dangerous. "Good answer," he murmured, setting the sketch on his desk. "This design, though, it's going to require some pretty intimate placement. You sure you're ready for that?" Heat bloomed in my chest at his words, at the way his gaze traveled down to where the tattoo would go. "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't ready." "Fair enough." He moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne mixed with ink and something uniquely him. "Mind if I take a look at the area? Need to see how the design will flow with your natural curves." My heart hammered as I nodded. This was professional, I told myself, just business. But when his fingers touched the fabric at my ribs, gently lifting, to expose the smooth skin beneath, nothing about it felt strictly professional. His touch was warm, careful, but there was an electricity in it that made my skin tingle. "Beautiful canvas," he said softly, his breath warm against my side as he examined the space. "The design will look incredible here." I shivered despite the warmth of the shop. "When can we start?" "Now, if you want. Like I said, we're closed. No interruptions." His eyes met mine again, and I saw the challenge there, the invitation. I should have said no. Should have scheduled for another day, when other people would be around, when the air wouldn't feel so charged with possibility. Instead, I heard myself saying, "Let's do it." Dan's smile was slow, predatory. "I was hoping you'd say that." He gestured toward the tattoo chair, a sleek black leather piece that dominated the center of his station. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll get everything ready." I settled into the chair, hyper-aware of every movement as Dan prepared his equipment. The buzz of the machine as he tested it sent vibrations through the air, and I found myself wondering what that buzz would feel like against my skin, what his hands would feel like guiding it. "You'll need to remove your dress," he said matter-of-factly, but there was nothing casual about the way he watched me. "Or at least pull it up significantly. The design goes pretty high." My fingers trembled slightly as I reached for the hem of my dress. The smart thing would be to ask for a gown, something to preserve modesty. Instead, I pulled the fabric up and over my head in one smooth motion, leaving me in just my bra and underwear. Dan's sharp intake of breath was audible. "Christ," he muttered, then cleared his throat. "Sorry, very professional canvas." I laughed, surprising myself. "Is that your technical term?" "It is now." His eyes roamed over my exposed skin with an appreciation that made me feel powerful, desired in a way I hadn't felt in months. "Lie back. This is going to take a while." The leather was cool against my bare back as I settled into position. Dan pulled on black gloves, the latex snapping against his wrists, and began preparing the stencil. But before he could apply it, he paused. "Actually, let me sketch this freehand first. Get a better feel for how it should flow." He picked up a marker. "Trust me?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. When the tip of the marker touched my skin, just below my ribs, I couldn't suppress the small gasp that escaped me. Dan glanced up, his eyes dark. "Sensitive?" he asked, but there was heat in the question. "A little," I admitted. "Good to know." His voice was rougher now as he continued sketching, the marker trailing along my ribs in swooping curves that made my skin sing. Each stroke was deliberate, careful, but there was something almost caressing about the way he worked. "You know," he said as he drew, "most people bring someone with them for support. Boyfriend, friend, someone. My fiancé thinks tattoos are trashy," I said, immediately regretting sharing something so personal. Dan's hand stilled for a moment. And you're marrying him because… The question hung in the air between us, because it was expected, because it was safe, because I'd been too afraid to want anything more. But I couldn't say any of that. Because it's the smart thing to do, I said finally. Smart's overrated. He resumed drawing, his strokes becoming bolder. Sometimes the best things in life are a little dangerous. His words sent heat spiraling through me. When he leaned closer, to work on a particularly intricate curve, his breath ghosted across my skin, and I had to bite my lip to keep from making a sound. There, he said finally, setting down the marker. What do you think? I looked down at the delicate vine he'd drawn winding around my ribs in perfect flowing lines. It was beautiful, sensual, exactly what I'd wanted but hadn't been able to articulate. It's perfect, I breathed. Good. Now comes the real test. He picked up the tattoo machine, the buzz filling the small space. You ready for this? I nodded, my pulse racing with anticipation and something deeper, more primal. The first touch of the needle was sharp, electric, sending sparks through my entire body. I gasped, my back arching slightly off the chair. Easy, Dan murmured, his free hand coming to rest on my hip, steadying me. Breathe through it. The pain becomes something else if you let it. He was right. As he continued working, the sharp bite of the needle transformed into something almost pleasurable, a deep throb that seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. His hand on my hip was firm, grounding, but I could feel the heat of it through. His gloves. That's it, he said softly as I relaxed into the sensation. Just let yourself feel it. The words sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the tattoo. Every stroke of the needle was precise, deliberate, and I found myself getting lost in the rhythm of it, in the focused attention he was paying to my body. You're handling this really well, he said after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Most people are squirming by now. I like the way it feels, I admitted, the words slipping out before I could stop them. His hand tightened slightly on my hip. Yeah? Tell me what it feels like. The question was loaded, dangerous, but I was too lost in the sensation to care. Like electricity, like every nerve is alive. The sound was almost a growl. I can see why you'd like that. He adjusted his position, leaning closer to work on a particularly detailed section, and his thigh brushed against my bare leg. The contact sent heat shooting through me, and I couldn't stop the small sound that escaped my throat. Sorry, he said, but he didn't move away. If anything, he seemed to press closer. Working space is pretty tight here. It's okay, I managed, my voice breathy. We fell into a charged silence after that, the only sounds the buzz of the machine and our increasingly uneven breathing. Every touch of the needle sent waves of sensation through me, and Dan's proximity was making it impossible to think straight. Need a break? He asked eventually, lifting the machine away from my skin. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He set the machine aside and peeled off his gloves, tossing them in the trash. When he turned back to me, his eyes were dark, hungry. How are you feeling? He asked, his voice low, intimate. Good, I whispered. Really good. The endorphins, he said, but his gaze was fixed on my mouth. They can be pretty intense. Is that what this is? I asked, because the heat coursing through my body felt like more than just endorphins. Maybe. He reached out, his bare fingers tracing the outline of the fresh ink on my ribs. Or maybe it's something else. His touch was gentle but electric, sending shivers across my skin. I should have pulled away, should have remembered my engagement ring sitting in my purse, should have thought about the life I was supposed to be building with someone else. Instead, I arched into his touch. We shouldn't, I whispered, even as my body betrayed my words. Probably not, he agreed, but his fingers continued their gentle exploration, tracing patterns on my skin that had nothing to do with the tattoo. But sometimes the things we shouldn't do are the ones we need most. When he leaned down, I knew I should stop him, should push him away, should remember all the reasons this was wrong. But when his lips touched mine, soft and questioning at first, then more insistent when I didn't pull away, all those reasons scattered like smoke. The kiss deepened, his hands framing my face as I melted into him. He tasted like coffee and something darker, more dangerous, and I couldn't get enough. My hands found his hair, threading through the dark strands as he kissed me like he was trying to memorize the taste of me. This is crazy, I gasped when we broke apart, both of us breathing hard. Completely insane, he agreed, his forehead resting against mine. Want me to stop? The smart answer was yes. The safe answer was yes. Instead, I shook my head. His smile was pure sin as his hands skimmed down my sides, careful of the fresh ink but bold everywhere else. Good, because I don't think I could if you asked. He kissed me again, hungrier this time, his hands exploring the curves of my body with the same focused attention he'd given to my tattoo. Every touch was deliberate, designed to make me gasp, to make me want more. When his mouth left mine to trail down my throat, I thought I might combust from the heat building inside me. His lips were soft but insistent, finding sensitive spots I didn't even know I had. "You're incredible," he murmured, against my collarbone, his breath warm against my skin. So responsive, so perfect. His words sent heat spiraling through me, and when his hands found the clasp of my bra, I didn't protest. The garment fell away, and his sharp intake of breath made me feel powerful, beautiful, desired. "Christ, you're gorgeous," he breathed, his hands reverent as they explored newly exposed skin. I should have felt exposed, vulnerable, but instead I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. Every touch of his hands, every press of his lips sent electricity through my body that had nothing to do with the tattoo and everything to do with the man touching me. When he took me in his mouth, warm and soft and perfect, I couldn't stop the cry that escaped me. My hands tangled in his hair, holding him close as he lavished attention on sensitive skin, making me arch and gasp beneath him. "So sweet," he murmured, his voice muffled. "You taste even better than I imagined." "You imagined?" I managed to ask, my voice shaky. He looked up at me, his eyes dark with want. "From the moment you walked in here, couldn't stop thinking about what you'd taste like, what you'd sound like when you lost control." His honesty was intoxicating, dangerous, and I found myself wanting to give him exactly what he'd imagined. When he continued his ministrations, building heat and pressure inside me with skillful touches, I stopped thinking altogether. The world narrowed to his mouth, his hands, the incredible sensations he was creating in my body. I was dimly aware of making sounds, of moving against him, of chasing something bright and desperate that seemed just out of reach. "Let go," he whispered against my skin. "Just let yourself feel this." And I did. The release hit me like lightning, sharp and sudden and overwhelming, making me cry out as my body convulsed with pleasure. He didn't stop, drawing out every last tremor until I was boneless, spent, floating in the aftermath. When he finally lifted his head, his lips were wet, his eyes dark with satisfaction and barely restrained hunger. "Beautiful," he said simply, pressing a soft kiss to my hip bone. "Absolutely beautiful." I reached for him then, my hands fumbling with his shirt, desperate to touch him the way he'd touched me. He helped me, pulling the fabric over his head, to reveal a canvas of ink across his chest and arms, muscles and art combining in a way that made my mouth water. "My turn," I whispered, sliding off the chair to kneel between his legs. His breath hitched as I reached for his belt, his hands threading through my hair as I worked at the leather. When I freed him from the confines of his jeans, he was already hard, ready, and the sight made heat pool between my legs all over again. "You don't have to," he started to say, but I silenced him with a look. "I want to," I said simply. "I want to taste you the way you tasted me." The sound he made was purely animal as I took him in my mouth, warm and salt and perfect. His hands tightened in my hair, not forcing but guiding, and I reveled in the power I had over him, the way I could make this confident, skilled man come undone with just my lips and tongue. "God, yes," he groaned, his hips moving in small, controlled thrusts. Just like that. Perfect. I worked him with growing confidence, learning what made him gasp, what made his grip tighten in my hair, what made him curse under his breath in languages I didn't recognize. When he tried to pull away, warning me he was close, I only took him deeper. He finished with a shout that echoed through the empty shop, his body tensing as I took everything he gave me. When he finally relaxed, pulling me up to kiss me deeply, I could taste myself on his lips mixed with the salt of him on mine. "That was—" he started, then shook his head, apparently at a loss for words. "Just the beginning," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. His eyes darkened. "Is that a promise?" Instead of answering with words, I climbed back onto the chair, this time straddling his lap. He was already hardening again, and when I positioned myself above him, we both groaned at the contact. "Are you sure?" he asked, his hands gripping my hips, holding me still even though I could see the effort it cost him. "I've never been more sure of anything," I breathed, and sank down onto him in one smooth motion. The sensation was incredible, overwhelming, perfect. He filled me completely, and for a moment we just stayed like that, connected, breathing hard, staring into each other's eyes. "Move," he commanded softly, and I did. The rhythm we found was slow at first, sensual, both of us savoring the slide and friction. His hands guided my movements, helped me find the angle that made stars explode behind my eyelids. Every thrust sent pleasure cascading through my body, building on the foundation he'd already laid with his mouth. So tight, he groaned, his head falling back. So perfect. You feel incredible. His words spurred me on, made me move faster, take him deeper. The chair creaked beneath us, the sound mixing with our harsh breathing and the soft sounds of skin against skin. I was climbing toward something bright and desperate again, chasing the edge he'd already pushed me over once, when he shifted, changing the angle so he hit that perfect spot inside me with every thrust. I cried out, my nails digging into his shoulders. Right there? He asked, his voice strained with control. Yes, I gasped. Right there. Don't stop. He didn't. If anything, he increased his pace, his hands helping me move faster, harder, chasing the release we both needed. The pressure built, and built until I thought I might shatter from the intensity of it. Come for me, he whispered against my ear, his voice rough with want. I want to feel you come apart around me. And I did. The second climax hit even harder than the first, making me scream his name as my body clenched around him. He followed. Moments later, his own release tearing through him with enough force to make him shout, his hands gripping me so tightly I knew I'd have bruises. We stayed like that for long moments afterward, clinging to each other, breathing hard, hearts racing, in perfect synchronization. When I finally lifted my head from his shoulder, his eyes were soft, satisfied. But there was something else there too. Something that looked dangerously like tenderness. We should finish your tattoo, he said eventually, his voice husky. I nodded, suddenly aware of the world beyond this perfect bubble we'd created. The real world, where I had a fiancé waiting at home, where I was supposed to be planning a wedding, where this was supposed to be the biggest mistake of my life. But as I settled back into the chair and he picked up his machine again, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. If anything, I felt more alive than I had in years. The final hour of tattooing passed in charged silence, both of us hyper-aware of what had just happened between us. Every brush of his gloved fingers against my skin sent aftershocks through my body, reminders of what those same fingers had done to me just moments before. When he finally set down the machine and peeled away the last of the stencil, the vine, wrapped around my ribs like a living thing, beautiful and sensual and permanent. Perfect, he said softly. But he wasn't looking at the tattoo. He was looking at me. I stood slowly, my legs still unsteady, and walked to the mirror. The design was everything I'd hoped for and more, flowing with my body's natural curves, enhancing, rather than hiding them. It's beautiful, I breathed. It suits you, he said, coming to stand behind me. In the mirror, I could see us together, his dark form behind my lighter one, his hands hovering just over my skin as if he wanted to touch but wasn't sure he should. What happens now? I asked, because I genuinely didn't know. I'd never done anything like this before, never cheated, never let passion override reason so completely. Now, he said, pressing a soft kiss to my shoulder, you go home to your fiancé and pretend this never happened. And I go back to being just the guy who gave you a tattoo. The words should have been a relief, should have made this easier. Instead, they felt like a knife to the chest. Is that what you want? I asked. What I want, he said, his voice rough, and what's smart are two very different things. I turned to face him, noting the conflict in his eyes, the way his jaw was clenched with the effort of holding back. You said smart was overrated, I reminded him. I also said the best things in life are dangerous. His hand came up to cup my cheek, thumb brushing across my lips. But some dangers are worth the risk, and others will destroy everything you've built. Which is this? I think you know. I did know. This felt like the kind of dangerous that changed everything, that made it impossible to go back to the life you had before. The kind of dangerous that made you question every safe choice you'd ever made. I should go, I said, but I made no move, to step away from him. You should, he agreed, but his thumb was still tracing my bottom lip, his eyes dark with want. We stood like that for a long moment, balanced on the edge of something that could either save us or ruin us. Finally, I forced myself to step back, to reach for my dress, to try to piece myself back together. But as I dressed and gathered my purse, as Dan cleaned his equipment and tried to pretend his hands weren't shaking, I knew that something fundamental had shifted. The tattoo on my ribs would heal, would become a permanent part of me, but it was nothing compared to the mark this night had left on my soul. At the door, I turned back one last time. Dan was watching me, his expression unreadable. Will I see you again? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Your tattoo will need a touch-up in a few weeks, he said carefully. Standard aftercare. It wasn't an answer, not really, but it was something. A possibility. A reason to come back, even if we both knew we shouldn't. Thank you, I said. For the tattoo. For everything. Thank you, he replied, for trusting me with your canvas. I left then, walking out into the cool, Night air with my skin still singing from his touch and my mind reeling from what had just happened. The drive home passed in a blur, and when I finally stood in my apartment, staring at myself in the bathroom mirror, I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. My lips were swollen from kissing, my hair was messed from his hands, and the fresh tattoo glowed red and beautiful against my ribs. But it was my eyes that gave me away. They held a heat, a satisfaction, a secret that I wasn't sure I could hide. When my fiancé called an hour later to ask about my day, I found myself lying with an ease that should have disturbed me more than it did. "Just got a small tattoo," I said, which was technically true. "Nothing dramatic." "Good," he said, relieved. "I was worried you'd do something crazy, if only he knew." But as I hung up the phone and prepared for bed, carefully avoiding the mirror that showed too much truth, I found myself touching the fresh ink on my ribs and remembering the man who'd put it there. Dan had marked me in more ways than one, and I wasn't sure I'd ever be the same. The real question wasn't what I'd done tonight. It was what I was going to do about the fact that I wanted to do it again. Have you ever had a moment that changed everything, that made you question every safe choice you'd made? A night that left more than just a physical mark? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one and want to know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like if this story got your heart racing and subscribe for more tales that push boundaries. Turn on notifications because trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next.